Chosen one, this message didn't find you by accident. It's not a coincidence you're reading or hearing this right now. This is divine timing. God led you here for a reason, because you've been silently fighting battles, enduring hidden tests, and carrying assignments few could understand. The world may never know the weight you've carried. They may never see the tears cried behind closed doors. But heaven saw, heaven kept record, and now heaven is getting ready to reward. This message is your confirmation. You passed tests they didn't even know you took. Now let's walk through what that really means, one chapter at a time. Before we dive deep, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, because this message isn't just another word. It's a divine confirmation for the chosen ones who've been tested in silence and passed battles no one else even knew existed. If your spirit resonates with this frequency, type 77 in the comments right now. That number isn't random. It's a prophetic code, a sacred signal to the Most High that you're aligned, awakened, and ready to step into the reward that's been stored up for your obedience. Understand this. Not everyone will make it to the end of this message. Only those who've been through the fire will recognize the oil. Only those who've passed the test will receive the promotion. Every word you're about to hear is layered with revelation. This isn't just something you listen to once. It's a living message, one that unfolds in divine timing. Re-watch it every time your soul calls you back, because each time you'll catch something heaven hid for that very moment. You've been tested. You've been tried. Now get ready to understand why heaven is about to reward what they never even saw. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The Hidden Test of Obedience. Chosen one, there were moments, sacred, unseen moments, when God whispered instructions into your spirit that didn't align with your timeline, your plans, or your emotions. He told you to move, and you moved even when you didn't know where it would lead. He told you to let go of relationships that felt familiar, of environments that once felt like home, of dreams you held tightly, and you let go, even though your soul cried. He told you to wait while everyone around you seemed to be accelerating, building, and shining. And still, you waited, faithful, quiet, obedient. That was a test, a divine examination, not graded by men, but measured by heaven, a test of obedience, pure, raw, and real. You see, obedience is not tested in convenience. It's tested in contradiction. It's tested when God's instruction doesn't match your current reality. It's tested when your logic says no, but your spirit says, yes, Lord. It's tested when God asks for your surrender in the very area you want to control. While others were being praised for performance, for image, for outward success, you were passing spiritual tests in private. You didn't have a stage. You didn't have applause, but you had a word, and you obeyed it. You obeyed when it cost you your comfort. You obeyed when you didn't get a timeline, just a promise. You obeyed even when those around you thought you were crazy, delusional, or moving backwards. That obedience, that's not weakness. That's kingdom strength. Because obedience is what God honors most. Not just gifts, not just prayer, not just sacrifice, but obedience. Because obedience says, I trust you more than I trust myself. And chosen one, heaven took note. Heaven watched every time you said yes when it hurt. Every time you gave up your will for His. Every time you chose faith over feelings. Instruction over impulse. That wasn't wasted. That wasn't overlooked. It was recorded. You passed a test that wasn't loud, but it was loyal. And in the kingdom, loyalty in secret leads to promotion in public. This is the kind of obedience that unlocks destiny. The kind that opens doors no man can close. The kind that breaks generational curses and activates generational blessings. You didn't obey for the spotlight. You obeyed for alignment. And now heaven is about to show you what it does with a surrendered vessel. The reward isn't coming because you were perfect. It's coming because you were obedient. And that chosen one is what separates those who are called from those who are truly chosen. You passed the test they didn't even know you were taking. And now God is about to move in a way they won't be able to explain. Because obedience done in the shadows always prepares the way for elevation in the light. This next chapter of your life, it's not random. It's a reward. Chapter 2, The silent test of endurance. Chosen one, no one saw what you went through, but heaven did. They didn't see the spiritual weight you were carrying while smiling. They didn't notice the internal war while you kept showing up. They never heard the tears that hit your pillow when you cried out to God and felt like the heavens were shut. They didn't witness the nights you sat in silence. Not because you had nothing to say, but because your soul was exhausted from holding on. This was a hidden battle, not for show, not for sympathy, but for refinement. You were walking through the silent test of endurance, a test that doesn't get attention, but is one of the most sacred forms of spiritual warfare. This wasn't about how loud you could shout hallelujah, but how deep your yes would still go when everything in your life said, give up. It wasn't about how excited you were in the beginning, but whether you would still believe when the journey got long, hard, and lonely. This test didn't come with signs or confirmations. It came with silence. A silence that wasn't empty, but sacred. A silence that required you to believe, even when you couldn't hear. You endured what others would have buckled under. You didn't break, though you felt cracked in 1,000 places. You didn't walk away, though the temptation whispered every day. You didn't let go, though your hands were shaking, and that is spiritual strength. That is holy resilience. That is the kind of endurance that only the chosen develop. Chosen one, let's tell the truth. You prayed and saw no immediate change. You fasted and still felt the pressure. You obeyed and things still didn't make sense. But you remained. That's what set you apart. And here's what most people miss. God didn't let the pain break you. He let it build you. Not because he wanted to see you suffer, but because he was preparing a vessel that could carry something glory-filled. And the more weight you carried in secret, the more capacity he was creating in you for what's coming. You weren't losing, you were lasting. You weren't forgotten, you were forged. You weren't broken, you were being rebuilt, better. Endurance is one of heaven's highest currencies. It's not flashy, it's not always rewarded by men, but in the spirit, it's everything. The enemy hoped you would quit. He sent discouragement, he sent delay, he sent distractions, but you endured every blow and kept your heart turned toward God. That didn't go unnoticed. Heaven took note of every moment you chose to stand instead of sink, to worship instead of worry, to trust instead of turn away. You passed the test, chosen one, and now, because you endured, you're stepping into a season of public reward for your private perseverance. This next season won't look like the last because God only allows those who endure to carry the kind of blessings that don't break them. You were built for this, and you proved it. Not with noise, not with crowds cheering you on, but with faith that refused to fail. And now the Lord says, because you didn't give up when it was hard, I'm about to release what others gave up waiting for. Get ready. The reward is on the other side of the endurance. You passed the test they didn't even know you were taking, and now heaven is responding. Chapter 3. The Test of Integrity and Isolation. Chosen one, there were seasons where it felt like the whole world moved on without you. People you once prayed for vanished without a word. The support you gave so freely to others wasn't returned when you needed it most. It wasn't just loneliness, it was a holy separation. And though it looked like rejection, it was really divine protection. You felt overlooked, unseen, pushed to the side while others advanced. You wondered, God, do you see me? Have you forgotten what you spoke over me? But what you didn't realize at first was that you were entering a sacred space, the wilderness of testing, the crucible of character, the quiet classroom of heaven. This was not random, it was intentional. You weren't being punished, you were being proven. Because when God is about to raise someone up, he always watches how they behave in the shadows before placing them in the spotlight. This was the test of integrity in isolation. It's easy to do right when people are watching. It's easy to stay disciplined when others are depending on you. But when the phone doesn't ring, when the platform is empty, when your name isn't trending and your inbox is silent, that's when true integrity is revealed. Would you still worship when no one was cheering you on? Would you still give your best when no one acknowledged it? Would you still choose purity when compromise would have been easier and more profitable? And you did. You stayed faithful. You kept your heart clean. You said no to shortcuts, even when they could have elevated you faster. You chose obedience over popularity, truth over comfort, and God's timing over your own ambition. You didn't post your pain online for sympathy. You brought it to the throne room in private. You didn't chase validation, you chased presence. You didn't manipulate your way into doors. You waited for God to open them himself. Chosen one, that kind of character is rare. That kind of loyalty, when no one is watching, is the reason God is about to trust you with more than you ever imagined. You see, public platforms are built in private places. Your stage wasn't shaped by applause. It was shaped by isolation, because God needed to make sure your soul was anchored deep enough that elevation wouldn't corrupt your spirit. And you passed. You passed the test of secrecy. You passed the test of silence. You passed the test that says, even if no one else believes in me, I still believe in the God who called me. God was watching. He saw the way you handled the hidden season. He saw how you resisted bitterness, how you resisted comparison, how you resisted giving up. He saw how you kept showing up, how you served others even when your own cup felt empty. And now he's preparing a reward that matches the weight of what you carried when no one else could see it. Because integrity matters in the kingdom, and the ones who prove they can carry the weight in the shadows are the ones God trusts with the light. Get ready, because the same isolation that once felt like abandonment is about to become your launching place. You were hidden, not to be forgotten, but to be preserved for the appointed time. Heaven's declaration over you is this: well done. You didn't fold. You didn't fake. You didn't forfeit. Now comes the unveiling. You passed the test of integrity and isolation, and what's coming next will be the proof that God never wastes obedience. Chapter 4, the test of forgiveness. Chosen one, this one. This one pierced deep. It wasn't the kind of wound that bleeds outwardly. It was internal, quiet, invisible to the outside world. But heaven saw it, and heaven allowed it, not to break you, but to bless you through it. This wasn't just a difficult season. This was one of the deepest spiritual examinations you could undergo, the test of forgiveness. And it came disguised in pain, pain wrapped in betrayal, pain that came from the very people you would have gone to war for, people who sat at your table, laughed with you, called you family. But when things got hard, they threw stones instead of support. They judged you when you were already low. They used your vulnerability as ammunition. They spoke curses over your name when you were just trying to survive. And for a moment, it felt like all of hell had permission to come against you through human mouths. Let's be real. There were nights you wanted to fight back. There were moments you drafted the text, wrote the post, rehearsed what you would say. But the Holy Spirit whispered, don't do it. Don't let their brokenness break you. Because this was bigger than offense. This was a test of elevation. See, anyone can praise when the crowd is cheering. Anyone can love when they're being loved. But God wanted to see what you would do when the very people you covered uncovered you. Would you retaliate or rise? Would you stay in the cycle of bitterness? Or would you rise above it in mercy? Would you get even or get free? And chosen one, you passed. Not because you weren't angry, not because you didn't cry, not because you didn't feel every ounce of that betrayal in your soul. You passed because you made the decision to forgive anyway. You forgave them when they didn't ask. You forgave them when they acted like nothing happened. You forgave them when everything in you said they don't deserve it. And guess what? You were right. They didn't. But forgiveness was never about them. It was about you staying free. Because unforgiveness is a chain that binds the one who carries it, not the one who caused it. God saw you unclench your fists in prayer. He saw the way you surrendered it at his feet, even if you had to do it over and over again. He saw the times you asked him to heal your heart instead of harden it. He heard your cries when you said, God, I don't want to hate them. I just want to be free. That was the moment heaven moved. Because while the enemy tried to break your heart with betrayal, God used it to reveal the strength of your own spirit. Forgiveness is a spiritual graduation. It is proof that you are no longer bound to the old cycle. It is the evidence that your maturity has now surpassed your emotions. It's when God can trust you to carry power without abusing it. Some people carry titles but not freedom. You, chosen one, are carrying both. Because you chose to walk away from the trap of vengeance and walk into the truth of victory. And now God is preparing a table. Yes, that table. The one he promised in Psalm 23. The one he prepares in the presence of your enemies. Not to humiliate them, but to vindicate you. To show them what he always saw in you, even when they mishandled you. Chapter 5. The test of faith without proof. Chosen one, this test right here, it separated the called from the truly chosen. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. There were no signs in the sky, no angels announcing your obedience, no crowds applauding your trust, just you and God, and silence. This was the test of faith without proof, the test that demanded you believe when there was nothing visible to believe in. When the door was still closed, when the money hadn't shown up, when the prayer hadn't been answered, when the situation looked dead, when the wilderness didn't seem to end, and yet somehow you still believed. You prayed like it was already done. You spoke life over dry places. You declared breakthrough while surrounded by breakdown. You sowed seeds in seasons of lack. You walked as if the promise was already in your hand, even though it wasn't even on the horizon. That chosen one is true faith, not just belief with your mouth, but with your movement. This was Abrahamic-level obedience, the kind of faith that walks up the mountain with the knife in hand, trusting that God will provide before you strike. The kind of faith that builds the ark before the first drop of rain. The kind of faith that steps out of the boat before the water parts. The kind of faith that makes no logical sense, yet moves heaven's heart. And that's what you did. You believed in the invisible. You trusted the whisper. You held on to the unseen hand of God when all other hands let go. You walked forward when every circumstance screamed, "Turn back." Others called you crazy. Some thought you were wasting your time. They said, "Why are you still praying about that? Why haven't you moved on? Why are you still believing for something that hasn't happened?" But they didn't understand the realm you were operating in. You weren't walking by sight, you were walking by spirit, because faith isn't grounded in evidence. It's rooted in covenant. Faith doesn't wait for proof, faith creates it. In the natural, there was nothing. But in the spiritual, your faith was shaking the atmosphere. It was creating waves in unseen realms. It was opening portals that had been locked for generations. It was establishing alignment between you and heaven's agenda. Chosen one, your faith became the currency that pulled favor into your timeline. That unwavering belief wasn't just spiritual, it was prophetic. You were declaring the future into your now. You were speaking the promise into formation. You were aligning your life with a reality that hadn't materialized yet, but was already written in the spirit. And now heaven is about to manifest what you believed for in the dark. Because faith isn't just believing when it's easy, it's trusting God's word when it looks like the exact opposite is happening. You could have stopped. You could have doubted. You could have walked away and said, "Maybe I heard wrong." But you didn't. You stayed. You stood. You kept trusting. You kept hoping. You kept speaking life into dead places. You kept walking with eyes fixed on the promise, not the process, and heaven recorded every step. Chapter 6. The Test of Waiting. Chosen one, this test wasn't loud like warfare. It wasn't obvious like betrayal. It came quietly, slowly, and yet it cut deeply. This was the test of waiting. Not just waiting a few days or weeks, not just waiting with a countdown clock, but waiting through seasons, long, stretching, silent seasons. Seasons where your heart grew weary from hoping. Seasons where you watched others get blessed with what you were still praying for. Seasons where you served faithfully, loved selflessly, gave generously, and yet your own answers remained delayed. You clapped for others while feeling forgotten. You celebrated miracles around you while wondering when it would be your turn. You watched open doors for them while yours remained shut. But here's the truth. The waiting wasn't a punishment, it was a purification. God wasn't ignoring you, he was inspecting you. Because waiting reveals what nothing else can. It shows if your worship is real, if your trust is rooted, if your surrender is genuine or just surface deep. Heaven wanted to know, Would you still seek him if the blessing didn't come right away? Would you still worship if the timeline didn't match your expectations? Would your posture remain low, humble, surrendered, not because you got what you wanted, but because you still trusted who he is? That's where you pass the test. You didn't run ahead of God trying to force your own breakthrough. You didn't manipulate the process to make something happen. You didn't settle for less just because it was faster. You waited, sometimes through tears, sometimes through silence, sometimes through deep frustration and even confusion. But you waited, and that wait wasn't wasted. It was sacred. Because while it looked like nothing was happening, everything was happening beneath the surface. Your character was being built. Your roots were going deeper. Your discernment was sharpening. Your spiritual authority was increasing. Waiting was working something in you that the blessing alone could never do. And now, heaven says, the wait has matured you. The delay has developed you. The time in between your prayer and its fulfillment has prepared you to handle the very thing you've been praying for. Chosen one, your season of waiting is transitioning into a season of revealing. What was growing in the dark is about to be seen in the light. What you carried privately is about to manifest publicly. Not rushed, not premature, but right on divine time. Because when God does it, he doesn't just answer the prayer, he elevates the person who waited well. So don't despise the wait. It wasn't just a delay, it was a divine classroom. It proved that your heart was not just after the promise, but after the promise keeper. Chapter 7, the test they never knew existed. Chosen one, they saw your presence, not your process. They saw your strength, but not your stretching. They witnessed glimpses of your journey, but never the full weight of your walk. They assumed your path was smooth because you carried your pain with grace. They thought you had it easy because you didn't collapse in public. They thought your confidence came from privilege, not realizing it was birthed through pressure, tears, and relentless spiritual battles. But there were tests, hidden tests that no one ever saw. Tests within the tests, layers of trials wrapped in silence, hidden behind a smile, shielded beneath obedience, the test of staying pure in a polluted world, when temptation whispered louder than truth and compromise would have been easier than conviction. The test of leading with love, even when all you received was criticism, betrayal, and rejection. When you kept showing up with compassion, even though your heart was bleeding. The test of giving when you had barely enough for yourself, still pouring out, still blessing others, still sowing seeds with shaky hands and a stretched soul. The test of surrendering again and again and again, when everything in you wanted to hold on to control, when letting go felt like losing, but in the spirit it was the path to winning. They didn't see any of that, because those weren't the tests designed to impress people. They were the ones designed to qualify you for heaven's next level. You passed the spiritual exams that don't come with certificates. You overcame soul trials that don't make the headlines. You endured internal crucifixions, dying to self daily so that Christ could live more fully in you. These were the secret tests. No applause, no platform, no validation, just you and God. And he was watching, not just what you did, but who you became. Not just how you performed, but how you persevered. Not just your outer works, but your inner surrender. You passed the tests they never knew existed, the kind of tests that heaven honors and hell fears. And now the shift is here. Heaven is opening the gates. The reward is being released. The crown that was forged in the fire is being placed upon your head. The world is about to see what God already spoke over you. The invisible preparation is becoming visible elevation. The secret tests are producing public transformation. Because when God says you passed, no man, no enemy, no lie can revoke it. No false narrative can cancel it. No delay can deny it. You passed when you thought you were failing. You qualified when you felt unworthy. You won battles that had no audience. And that's exactly what made you chosen. Heaven is not just applauding you, heaven is backing you. This next season is not just favor, it's divine confirmation. You passed the test they never knew existed, and now the promise they never saw coming is about to manifest through you, not to prove them wrong, but to prove that God is faithful to those who stay faithful to him. This is your moment, chosen one. It's your season of release. Heaven is just starting. So hear this, chosen one. You've passed more than a season. You've passed more than a trial. You've passed the test of being trusted by heaven. And now God is releasing what eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, and hearts haven't imagined.